And we are back with episode number 14 of ClubCast, the official podcast of the Diamond Club. And we are recapping the World Series. The MLB season is officially over, and the Texas Rangers reclaim their first World Series title in franchise history, beating the Arizona Diamondbacks in 5 games, winning the series 4-1. I'm gonna be honest, straight off the bat, I thought it was going to be a little bit more competitive World Series. I originally just kind of had it at least going 6 or 7 games.
Right.
Rangers had other plans for that, and pretty much after Game 1, they pretty much they dominated that entire series. Besides that one loss in Game 2, where we'll leave that as the outlier. But yeah, like we said, it was an interesting matchup. Whether you're a hardcore baseball fan or if you just like sports in general, there's good and bad from this World Series. But just getting a little bit of your reaction. What's your reaction to finally seeing the Rangers get over that monkey off their back and winning their first World Series? Because when we were growing up, we saw the Rangers get to the World Series and get close. We've seen them have a lot of playoff collapses against the Blue Jays, and now they finally put it all together to this year.
Yeah, I remember, dude, bringing that up. I remember, my man Cliff Lee, yeah, when he did a half year, he was in Texas when they got, I don't know if they got to the World Series, if they got the CS, but then they fell apart. But yeah, man, it's fun to obviously see a new team win. Like you said, it was interesting. It was a good word for it. It was an interesting matchup. I wouldn't say it was good. I wouldn't say it was bad. Um, Obviously, one team had won before and one team hadn't, so that's kind of a dynamic there. But yeah, it was fun. Obviously, the Rangers hit a bunch like we knew they were going to. There wasn't a lot of opposition there on the hitting end, so it was one sided. Like you said, the Rangers decided it was going to be 5 games. They just hit the ball and kept going. We got some guys that we called. I mean, Corey Seager being, we're going to talk about him later, being one of the best players in baseball. I like to see him get another ring, a real ring. And and then of course, as much as we don't like them, it's fun to see two ex Mets getting rings on new teams, and DeGrom and Scherzer. So yeah, it was an interesting World Series. A lot of hitting from the Rangers. It sucked seeing Garcia go down, but Corey and Marcus Simeon and all those other guys really picked up for him. So congrats to the Rangers, man. But let's go next year, man.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it with Garcia. I'm kind of glad that the series ended pretty much immediately after he got hurt because I feel like it kind of, I wouldn't say it wasn't an exciting World Series, but having him, Corey Seager, and even Marcus Simeon kind of heat up, seeing that Texas lineup.
Mhm.
When I heard that Garcia wasn't playing anymore, because I sent it. If it was an oblique, we knew it was going to be extended period of time. That shit doesn't just go away overnight. So I'm kind of glad that the Rangers, they took that next man up mentality. Travis Janikowski, Phillies legend, coming in, getting a couple rips, getting that. I believe he had a triple. And yeah, they said it. They weren't gonna. The Rangers, if anybody, had to deal with pretty big, significant injuries this entire season. Not even just the postseason. It was them. Because right off the bat, they had to lose the ground. That was their big marquee signing this offseason. He pretty much wasn't even mentioned. You can't even think about him all season because of how early in the year he got hurt. He only made like 2 or 3 starts and then he was pretty much done. And then they make the move to get Max Scherzer, who wasn't really Max Scherzer this year. He kind of was all over the place, up and down. But yeah, in terms of the playoffs, none of us, pretty much anywhere in baseball media, and me and you included, we didn't have the Rangers making it all the way to the World Series, let alone winning. I've said, I thought they had way too many question marks. And then you go to that last day of the season where they fail to win the division when they just need to win 1 game. It pretty much looked like gloom for them moving forward. I mean, even you said, like, there's just too many issues, and they seem like a team that had a really good regular season that would lose in the first round. I pretty much felt that same sentiment right there, but they ended up being the most consistent team in the playoffs.
Yeah.
The Dodgers bats went cold, the Phillies bats went cold out of nowhere. Pitching, they managed to get it done with the starters and their bullpen. That was a huge question mark for them. Besides like a couple games against Houston, their bullpen was pretty good this entire postseason. And then the offense, they just never slowed down. Yeah, there was games where they got shut out, and maybe didn't score as many runs as they could have, and they ended up losing. But they went undefeated on the road,
Mhm.
and when you do that, I mean, you're gonna win. You're gonna win a lot of ball games. You're gonna win a lot of series, and this team pretty much looked unfazed the entire time around. So I think that was the biggest thing about that I took away from this is that the Rangers just kind of, they had winning on the road was the big thing because like that doesn't really happen much, especially with the stadiums they had to go to. I get Tampa, but that was a still really good team. Baltimore, young up and coming team, and then taking every single game in Houston and in Arizona. That's something that really doesn't happen in the playoffs. So. Congrats, like you said, to the Rangers. The first World Series, and I think they've been around for 60 plus years.
Yeah, man.
Now there's only a couple teams that don't have that World Series championship yet.
Yeah, I remember sitting in LA watching the Phillies play the Rangers for the first 3 games, thinking, "How the hell is this team losing to this trash ass Rangers team?" And now I don't feel as bad. So at least at least there's one bonus to this. But yeah, just bring on next year, man. Fuck this.
Yeah, I mean, the Rangers, they got it done. They did it. They kind of had a complete 180 from where they were 2 years ago. They're the first World Series winner to lose 100 plus games just almost 2 seasons prior. And last year wasn't really anything special either. They almost lost, I believe, almost 100. They were kind of well below 500. So, but they set out a goal. They got key free agents, made some good trades, and then the guys that they drafted and developed, they also helped along the ride. So honestly, they kind of did everything right in such a short span. So I mean, credit to them. They got the job done. Everyone clowned DeGrom when he said, "Hey, I'm coming here to win a World Series," and they fucking won one his first season there. So I guess that goes for something. And like you said, for the Mets listeners, he got his ring. So
He did indeed.
all right. So segueing, we can't congratulate the Rangers enough. There's been so much stuff that they went through this year. But we're National League guys. And the biggest surprise, arguably this season and this postseason, was the Arizona Diamondbacks. We said at the beginning of the year, we watched them on opening day in Los Angeles, and we all agreed, hey, this Arizona team, they could be sneaky good. They could make a playoff spot. I didn't know they were going to end up sweeping LA, going into Philly, winning 2 games in Philly and 6-7, on their way to winning the world, almost winning the World Series, at least winning the NL championship. So, how surprising was it to see them go this far? And do you think realistically they will be in contention for the NL pennant again next year?
I think it's funny that you bring up that we were in opening day and what we said because we did say that. It's funny because we were at the hotel and we were talking about how shitty the Rangers team was, and then we're at the game watching the Diamondbacks. We're talking about how good this team could be, and we were fucking right on that one. Like you said, there was a lot of sneaky players on that team that were just really good. Like Ketel Marte carried that hitting streak the whole playoffs. It felt like Corbin Carroll showed up in the clutch, rookie of the year, definitely. The tough thing looking at them is it's so top heavy in the NL. It feels like with these top teams like the Phillies, like the Braves, like the Dodgers. Even last year when I watched this Phillies team that was honestly went on that run there, they looked fucking unbeatable in 2022. Um, I never thought, honestly, really going into the next year, I wasn't like, okay, let's go like win another pennant. Like I didn't think like that's not something in baseball that happens very often. Like in football, you see these other in football or basketball, you see these teams that go in and win, 2, 3, 4 championships or conferences in a row. Obviously, we have the Astros on one side, but that's the outlier. Uh, it's just real tough with those other teams around them. Obviously, I think they'll be good. Um, the regular season wasn't that good this year, so obviously I would imagine they would be at least around that same mark. It really depends on what they do in the offseason because there's a lot of guys out there that they could really add to the team to just fill those spots where they were lacking. Because it wasn't because it was it's really opens your eyes when you get to the playoffs because every mistake, every fault is emphasized. So if once you have that playoff experience, you can go into it and say, "Hey, now we really know what we need." Hopefully, I wouldn't say hopefully, but for the Diamondbacks, hopefully they go out and really address those spots where they were lacking, where there was just some guys in the lineup that were free outs at points. Um, just I don't know. Just you have to make a complete team to compete in the NL, and it'll be tough for them to be back in the World Series next year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, not to sound like a hater because they are on the NL West, but they barely got in, and they had to have a lot of things go right for them because not only did it's not like they went on like a 2011 type Cardinals run in September where they had to win like 11 out of 15 games and the other teams had to lose. No, they fell into the playoffs. They got swept by the Houston in the last week of the season, and they had, I believe, a record under or very close to 500 in the whole month of September. It's just for them, the Cubs decide to have a similar month and collapse. And when you get teams like the Marlins making it as well, it kind of shows how weak that bottom tier of the wild card was in the National League this year. Like you said, the National League seemed very top heavy this year. But there was also a lot more competitiveness for those wild card teams because they're pretty much all the way to the last week of the season. We didn't know who was going to get those two last spots or that last sixth seed because you had the Reds in there, you had the D-backs, the Marlins, even the Giants up to an extent. The Padres pretty much, they wouldn't go away. It's going to be a lot more competitive next year because a lot of these teams, I believe, especially in the National League West, they're all going to try to get better, minus the Rockies, who are still in their rebuilding phase. And I mean, they only won 84 games.
Right.
And I don't think 84 wins gets you back to the NL wildcard next year. Maybe the sixth one, but I expect teams like the Cubs, the Marlins. I expect a really big offseason from the San Francisco Giants. I mean, the Padres are getting clowned left and right because they can't pay their players. They have to take out a loan. But they still have a decent core roster where they underperformed heavily. I don't really expect that again this year or this upcoming year. So I'm gonna say I would say there's like a higher chance that they miss the playoffs than make it back to the World Series or even make it back to the NLCS at least. But they do have a really good young roster. But they have a lot of holes around that roster too. Third base is a hole. I mean, I like their defense, but Christian Walker kind of had a very big slump, and he's getting older. And then their pitching, it seems like that's what finally unraveled. And by all means, nobody had good starting pitching like 1 through 5 this entire postseason except maybe the Phillies, like we said,
Right.
because nobody else had a full rotation. Like the Dodgers had 2 actual starters, and we actually come out today. Kershaw actually just been pitching with an injured shoulder for almost half a year, and I mean, even the Rangers, they were going, all right, we're gonna go Evaldi and maybe Scherzer, and who was the other one? Montgomery. That was it. And then they were like, hopefully they had the advantage where they had like Dan Dunning and all that to give you bulk innings. John Gray, who had a couple good outings in this World Series. I just don't see the Arizona Diamondbacks kind of putting that roster together because I mean they're in a big market in Phoenix, but they don't spend like that. And I believe they were on a TV deal with Bally's, and I think Bally's went bankrupt.
Yes.
So their TV deal's gone. This has been a big thing that a lot of I've been reading about is that because those TV deals for the Padres, anyone that had Bally's is gone. They now have to be marketed through it or streamed through the MLB. That's a lot of money that's gone. The Phillies know about a TV deal. The Dodgers know about a TV deal. That allows you to fucking spend this big money and get those guys. And the D-backs, I mean, I think their projected payroll for next year is like 150, and I don't see them really going much over that. And I don't see many free agents even wanting to go there. I mean, truth be told. So uh, I'll sound like a hater. I don't think they even make the playoffs next year because I just think a lot of these other teams in the National League just get better. But they do have a lot to build off. They still are going to be that stingy team. Like teams that are hover around that 82 kind of to 90 win range, they may not make the playoffs, but they can be annoying to you in the regular season. And the D-backs have been that for the Dodgers for the past couple seasons, even when they were awful. Like they would still sneak a couple wins away. Like Kershaw, I think almost has a 500 record in his career against them. So um, they'll be stingy. The way they play baseball is very frustrating, where they're athletic, stealing bases, bloop hits, just contact, getting on base, all that. It can translate, but over 162, I don't think it translates um, year after year.
Yeah, honestly, I would have to agree with you because it's. I like the point that you brought up with about the other teams because that's something that you don't really think about because you think about okay, this team made it to the NLCS, made it to the World Series, and now they're going to go get better. So obviously they're going to be good. They won 84 games. I'm sure the Padres are going to go do something. They're always in the fucking mix. Giants probably going to have a big offseason. Cubs were right there. Reds are developing and getting on that fringe. You never know what the Marlins are going to do, especially now that they made the playoffs in a full season. It's tough for them, like because also like you said, it's not an attractive location. Like you would think that this in this big market in Phoenix and Arizona in enclosed stadium and like a nice area of the country would have like some attractiveness to the baseball team, but it's just not something they push there in terms of themselves and in terms of like the whole state. They're definitely more of like a football, college football. Even the Suns are pretty big out there. So it's tough for them to really keep developing unless it's within. And we're seeing nowadays it's impossible almost to win by just developing within. These teams that are winning are big spenders. You see it again this year with the Rangers, big spenders buying most of their team. So yeah, it'll be tough for them to compete with the bigger markets, the bigger acting markets than their pretty big market.
Yeah, I mean, just by going off because they're in the National League West, and from what I saw, like pretty much all year, is that the Giants won 80 games, the Padres won I think 82, so you're talking about 4 or 2 wins away from tying them, and I expect the Giants to probably go all in on getting some good guys because they went in on Aaron Judge last year, and then Carlos Correa missed out. Well, technically they got one, but then they backed out of it, but they didn't get the job done. So I think everybody in that team, everyone in that division is expected to either bring everybody they had back or get better. And that's including the Dodgers. So it's going to be a challenge for them, but I think they can make some noise and probably fight for that 6th or 5th spot wild card. I don't expect them to win the division. But anything can happen. And I say it all the time because I think out of any playoff like tournament, whatever you want to call it, postseason, baseball is probably the most up in the air where you don't know what's going to happen because how often do we see the best teams actually meet in the World Series? Doesn't really happen. The last time it happened was 2020 in the short 60 game season where both one seeds ended up making it all the way there. So recently it's been wild card, maybe a division winner. Like this year, it was both, I believe, 6 seeds that made it all the way. So that's just crazy in itself to think about. But we'll see what happens. If they make any big moves, it's not going to be free agency. I assume it'll be trades, which is what they've done before. That's where they got Moreno, Gurriel. Um, I don't expect them to make big moves with their money.
Yeah, I think the trade market is going to be the bigger thing for them because that's where they'll be able to match contracts and do things like that to save their money. Because I just don't see them, like you said, making a big splash signing unless they're able to get one of these, upper mid level guys that they can turn into a real star there and next to some other good guys like Carroll and Walker. But yeah, it'll be tough for them to be back in that position, definitely.
Yeah. Well, speaking of spending money, the Rangers, like you mentioned, have done that a lot these past two off seasons. And the first signing that kind of kicked off all of that was Corey Seager. He signed there, I believe it was, I think, a 9-year deal, um, well over $300 million. He pretty much, they were already in the process of rebuilding, jump started it more. They signed Semyon after, they get DeGrom this last offseason, make a bunch of trades. But now Corey Seager gets the shine in October again. And I feel like this year, compared to the years prior, he finally got a lot of the spotlight
Mhm.
because of, I would say, probably benefit because of the teams that were in the postseason at the time. And especially this World Series, when I think of like, all right, who's a star player that most or is relatively known? You probably would say Corey Seager, maybe Max Scherzer, but he wasn't really playing. And
Corey,
then Seager kicks it off game one,
right.
getting the home run to tie it. Pretty much ran away with it. I mean, once Seager was going, the whole Texas Rangers offense was going. Seager is one of two position players to win MVP in the World Series as a position player. The other one is Mr. October himself, Reggie Jackson, who did it with, I believe, the A's and the Yankees. Um, After what we've seen from Seager in the 2020 World Series and that postseason run, all the way up until now, is there a conversation to be had that he's probably the best active postseason position player?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a conversation there. I think, like you said, I enjoyed watching it this year. I think it really helped them that, like you said, there was no real teams because it became the storyline. He honestly became the storyline of everything after, especially after Adolis Garcia got hurt and after everybody realized that the Diamondbacks are not good. They they blocked in on this Corey Seager, Mr. October trend, and honestly, they're not wrong. I mean, we all seen the picture. Same amount of games, same amount of homers, same amount of RBIs as Reggie Jackson. Obviously, I'm not incredibly familiar with everything that he's done, and I didn't get to watch it. But I can tell you it's pretty fucking fun watching Corey Seager, dude. I know you watched him for a while. We both watched him in 2020, and that year it was incredible. He just has that demeanor. I mean, he has that Bryce Harper demeanor where it's just like, okay, I know what I have to do. Like, it doesn't matter what time it is, it doesn't matter what game it is. I'm gonna go do what I need to do. We saw it in the beginning of October when he was like fucking 12 for 15 or whatever. Then when he got walked like 9 times out of like 12 at bats because they were that scared of him. Um, they really went out and got him, and they knew what they were getting. Once he became healthy, it was over. It was over for them. Um, Obviously, his postseason heroics are going to matter more to us more than most people because that's all that really matters at the end of the day. But yeah, man, Corey Seager, there's nobody, honestly, after the only person that I thought was really invincible, the only two people that there were was Jordan and Bryce, and we saw both of them kind of collapse towards the end of the playoffs this year, and the one guy who didn't ended up winning rings. So I think that's definitely the biggest telling point at this story.
Yeah, I think like Seager's demeanor is similar to like Trout in a way where he's a very laid back, quiet guy. But when the moment calls for him to show emotion, he reads the room. I've only seen him maybe do it twice, and that was the home run off of Verlander in the 2017 World Series, and then when they actually won the World Series in 2020. It's probably been the only time I've ever seen him actually like scream or show emotion, and then just seeing him hit that home run in Game One to tie it with a very big stadium. Because when we watched it in 2020, I didn't realize how many fans could just like go in there. Kind of looked like a coliseum. I thought it was like a football stadium for how high the fan like the seating goes up. But he read that moment and he hits a home run to tie it in Game One of the World Series, a game where the D-backs pretty much were on their way to winning. Their whole formula of like getting up that pretty much changed the whole series. Changed the whole series,
It was
and Seager just didn't stop hitting. You know, for whatever reason, I mean, I tweeted about it, and so did a bunch of other people. Why the hell were the D-backs even continuing to pitch to Seager, especially in when Garcia was out? They were trying to pound him inside, and he would just take an oppo hit. Like they were still shifting him, and he would just got a little nut. That was with the hit that broke up. Gallen had a no hitter going 6 innings, and Seager literally had a swinging bunt that went against the shift, and then that's what unraveled that entire inning. And then they ended up scoring the one run, pretty much the winning run. Seager scored the winning run in the World Series because at that point it was 1-0. D-backs didn't even score a single run that entire game. But I would say right now, just because of recency bias, I mean, it's hard to argue against him being like that guy.
Right.
But I feel like this always comes up because Harper last year was that guy. And then when you look at Harper's career postseason stats, they're pretty fucking monstrous too. And Harper, I mean, he's had a lot of taste of the postseason, but it's only recently where he's actually gotten like deep into the postseason. Like it when the Nationals, it was always like they would. I think he only made it to the playoffs like I think 3 or 4 times, and it was always first round exits. And he was good in them, but like you only get to play like 3 or 4, and then a couple of them went 5 games. Seager's kind of been on those Dodgers teams that have kind of been all up and down. They've either went all the way, got to the World Series, either lost in the first round. And since I've seen him play more than probably what most people in the national media have seen, I've seen him at his worst in October too, because I can recall him just getting signed like 2021, 2016. He kind of, after the NLDS, he kind of went cold. I mean, 2017, he missed the entire NLCS, didn't really hit well in the World Series either. And then 18, he was hurt. 19, he was coming back from injury, kind of was okay. It wasn't really until 2020 and then this year where he kind of, you just remember him because he went on that whole run and ended up winning the ring, winning MVP. So I think if he puts it together and say the Rangers make the playoffs again next year and he continues to stay hot in the postseason and starts breaking more records, then I'll say, yes, he's a new Mr. October. But right now, I think he's just a really good postseason player.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's got to be continued success. That's why I would definitely put him as, a top 3 guy. I think there's 3 guys. I guess you could add in like Jose Altuve, somebody like that in there. But
honestly, I'm honestly going fucking Altuve
yeah,
because even more than Alvarez, because I feel like once Altuve hit that 1 home run in game, what was it, 5?
yeah,
I was like, this motherfucker's inevitable, dude. Like this dude, because he doesn't even care. Like hits a home run to win the game, and he's like
yeah.
walking around like nothing. Like they just expect that. And then Alvarez is kind of getting up there, but I like Harper in the playoffs too. I mean, like that's a scary at bat. If I'm a pitcher, I'm fucking terrified to pitch to Harper. And most teams, like in those last 2 games of against the D-backs, they kind of pitched around him, and the Phillies were feeling the pressure, and he was making mistakes. So Seager just this year didn't make those mistakes, but I have seen him in years prior be pressed.
Right. That's what the thing is. Most people, I mean, unless you really watch the Dodgers runs, you didn't see him really get pressed like that. I think those kind of guys that we just named are guys who've been doing it year after year after year. I mean, every year you have somebody who goes off. Like you had a Rosarena, you had Eddie Rosario, you had Steve Pierce. I mean, like all these guys who are random people just, having incredible postseasons that honestly, if they had 2 or 3 years like that, there'd be fucking Mr. October. You know what I mean? But it's just those guys. And at this point, it's got to be Corey, man. Like the way he was even treated in the beginning of October, the way I think obviously the media blew it a little bit more out of proportion than it was at the time. But at the end, if it ends up in a ring, man, it ends up in a fucking ring. That's all that really matters.
Yeah. Well, Seager, he's got another 7, 8 years left of that deal. The Rangers have a really good team still. They'll definitely be active this offseason. Let's see if they repeat. If you had to put if you were betting on it, what are the odds you would say that the Rangers repeat next year?
So the favorite if the favorite would be plus 100, I would put a Rangers repeat at plus 1,000, maybe plus like 1,200. It's not as out of proportion as the Diamondbacks is. I think this is actually a good team that could sustain and keep building. But they're definitely still not the favorites. I still don't think they're the best team in baseball. I don't think they're a top 3 team in baseball, probably. Especially like I don't know what happens with Jordan Montgomery or with these other guys, but it'll be tough. They'll get DeGrom back. That'll obviously be a big question mark, but it's not. I am a betting man, and it's not a bet that I would take.
I kind of agree with you just because MLB hasn't had a repeat champion since the
Right.
Yankees in like the early 2000s. It seems like it's even if you make it to back-to-back World Series, it's incredibly hard to make it back to the playoffs. It's incredibly hard to make it back to the World Series, and it's extremely hard to win a World Series, let alone back-to-back World Series. And the Rangers are familiar with that. Before they won this World Series, they lost their own set of back-to-back World Series. So I would put it pretty low too. I don't know about plus 1,000. I think it was DraftKings released their book. I think they were plus 600, 700, something around there, which sounds reasonable. Obviously, a lot of Rangers fans are kind of butthurt because they're that low. Because
It's still
if you look at the teams that are on there, every year I always see it and kind of laugh. Of course, the Dodgers are like 2.
yeah.
The Braves were 1, Dodgers were like 2, Astros were like 3.
Phillies were 4.
Those are just the teams that have been to the postseason more. And at the end of the day, that's really all you need. I need to see consistency with teams because that's why I never really put the Phillies with the betting odds to win the World Series. I think they were 5th, but
Yeah.
I was like, I need to see consistency because I mean, at the end of the day, like if you take a sample size, if I make it at least 10 straight times, I should come away with it at least once. And that's pretty much what the Astros did. That's what the Braves did. That's what the Dodgers did. All of them have collectively at least won one World Series in that span of those like 8 years.
I think this Rangers team is extremely like the Phillies team, other than they actually won. But you have a really deep lineup, a bullpen that could be really good or really shitty, and you have 2 top end starters, three top end starters that could be good. And like I said before, I had no faith in the Phillies going back to the World Series. So it's kind of the same scenario for me.
Yeah. Well, the World Series is officially over. The Rangers win. They are the champions. And the Diamondbacks are representing the National Leagues as the NL champions. We can't forget that. But it is officially the offseason. It started, I believe, yesterday after the first day after the World Series. There's that 5-day window where teams can have conversations with their own free agents. And they also have a bunch of other decisions over these next 10 days. Obviously, that 5-day window, like I mentioned, you can talk to your own free agents. There's also the club options, the team options, and then the player options or the mutual options, which have to be offered within that 5-day window. So if it's not offered if you don't hear anything about it by November 6th, then those players are becoming free agents. A bunch of them have been reported today. I know a couple on the Dodgers got reported. Some extensions have already been signed. I know the Braves signed up that one reliever they traded for. And then the Dodgers extended Max Muncy yesterday. Other than that, I would say the big key dates looking forward, GM meetings, they are starting, I believe, next week on the 7th. Pretty much nothing really happens there. Just a bunch of GMs get together, kind of preliminary trade talks, because that's all you're going to hear about this offseason is rumors. I would say the offseason doesn't really get started into gear until the winter meetings, which this year are on December 4th to the 7th. And then the MLB Rule 5 draft is on December 7th. And then in February, sometime, they haven't announced a date. That's when arbitration cases go in. But other than that, what kind of dates do you start to see a lot of these dominoes in the free agent market and trade market start to kind of fall?
I think it's been getting sooner and sooner over the last few years. I think it's always a guessing game of when the first guy's going to go. There's not a ton of top end talent this year, so that helps it a little bit. But like Nola's contract's going to be a big one. Blake Snell's contract's going to be a big one. Guys like that are going to be the guys to look out for, definitely, because once one of these guys start going and they can gauge the market on how it's been, that definitely will, like you said, start the dominoes. Just keep people rolling. I think honestly the bigger thing not the bigger thing, but one of the big things I overlooked is the Rule 5 draft. I like that you brought that up. The Phillies had a guy that played center field for many years, Shane Victorino, who was a Rule 5 draft pick. There, we talked about it earlier. A lot of these mid-level teams, not necessarily mid-level, but on the fringe teams like the Reds, like the Cubs, like the Padres, like the Giants, are 1-2 guys away. Can find one of these bats or an arm out of the pen, or even a back end rotation guy for nothing, and all they have to do is keep him on the roster. It's the Phillies did it with Noah Song last year. Obviously, a bigger risk, a different scenario there, but those are the kind of guys you go after, the top end talent guys that may have had injuries or may be on a last year of arbitration, some scenario that puts them on this list. But yeah, I think look out for the Rule 5 draft definitely, but I think the contracts are going to come sooner this year. I think the games are kind of less are less as they were, over the last decade or so.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Rule 5 draft because, I mean, if you're really into baseball, like management, rosters, like we are, it's an interesting time because I know for the Dodgers at least, there's a few guys that have just became Rule 5 draft eligible, and like there's some good prospects in that pool. So you kind of have to make some hard decisions with the 40 man, because you also have to think anybody that was on the 60-day IL, they are officially put back on the 40 man. I think the Dodgers at the end of the World Series yesterday had like over 40 guys on their 40 man, so they had to make some decisions with that. Technically, there's a bunch of them that still aren't on the 40 man because the R players. The another date that I didn't mention that is also interesting, because it's depending on what teams do to clear up those roster spots for the Rule 5 draft to get some of these prospects on there, is the non-tender deadline, which is where you can just pretty much what happened with Bellinger last year, using his last year of arbitration, and the Dodgers pretty much just said, nope, we don't want to offer you a contract. He was officially non-tendered. That deadline is on November 17th. There are a few guys that are pretty much around any team that are eligible for that, if you're trying to save a quick buck. And then the qualifying offer, there are a few guys, especially on the Phillies, some big names. Aaron Nola and Rhys Hoskins are the two ones that I can think of right off the top of my head. That deadline is also on November 6th as well. It's an interesting time in baseball because it seems like the first couple days after the World Series are over, it's kind of teams kind of reassessing things. And then after club options, qualifying offer, all that stuff is done with, that's when the free agency really begins, because then you really have the set in stone who's out there. I think it will go a little bit quicker than years past. I'm still traumatized from 2019 when Harper waited all the way to like freaking February to sign. Machado drew it up to. Obviously, the biggest one to set the market is Ohtani. And
Yeah.
I really think off the top of my head, there's really only like 3 or 4 teams that can sign him. So those teams will bid amongst themselves. But
Right.
the other teams that can't bid for them, they'll go get the other guys. Like someone mentioned, all right, yeah, the Dodgers, they're probably not going to go back after JD Martinez because they're going after Ohtani. So some other team that needs a DH that doesn't have a high payroll like that, they'll just swoop in and take JD on a lower deal because Otani's going to get like 500 million potentially. So that'll be exciting. I think it'll go a lot faster. I think there's going to be a lot of trades this year. I really think this offseason is going to be really big, like across the sport. I think there's going to be a lot of changes. The Phillies have some tough decisions to make as well. Dodgers, I mean, after back-to-back NLDS losses, they have a lot of decisions to make. The fans are, we're kind of spoiled because we get big players year in and year out. But at the end of the day, we just want to win. The Phillies want to win. These teams that were on the fringe playoffs, they want to win too now. Obviously, I think it's going to be a big offseason. So I'm interested to see what happens.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. The expanded playoffs are definitely an attribution to that. But I think the bigger thing is these teams that everybody thought was going to be good. I mean, like you have the Cardinals with 2 former MVPs. You have the Mets. You have the Giants and the Padres. All these teams who have star-studded lineups who are not good or didn't make the playoffs. I mean, like the Cardinals were one of the worst teams. It was pretty
Yeah.
bad at some level. And like you said, it's not just going to be the top level teams. It's going to be the teams on the fringe. It's going to be the teams at the bottom, and it's going to be the teams at the top. Obviously, like you said, the top four teams for like Otani are going to have their battle, and that's why I don't think it'll take that long because I think Otani knows his market. He knows what teams are available. Like he knows that 25 at least of the teams are don't even have the capacity probably of
Yeah.
signing him. But the other teams are going to go, and they're not going to worry about whatever the top teams are doing. They're going to go sign their guys. So I like, yeah, I hate that you brought up 2019. That was one of the worst fucking 4 months of my life in that offseason. But yeah, I hope it goes quicker. And I think it'll go quicker.
Yeah. Well, that pretty much segues all the way to our last segment. Pretty much what's next of what we're going to do with this, kind of the website, all that. Um, this offseason is going to be busy for both of us. I've been writing for Dodgers Beat. I'm definitely going to write a couple pieces about some other non-Dodger teams. My next one, I'm working on a thing with the Padres. Jake, he released an article yesterday highlighting pretty much about the Phillies 2023 and how it kind of ended on disappointment. Make sure to go check that out. But, we got a lot of things planned, not only for the podcast, where I really want to try to get us going for big time stuff, maybe have some conversations with some other people going over their teams. But definitely visit the website, diamondclub.blog. Check out our stuff there. I know, Jake, you mentioned on your little poll thing, you may do some player evaluations. I definitely know you're going to be thinking about what the Phillies are going to be doing this offseason, just like I'm going to be thinking about what the Dodgers are going to do as well. That's just the biggest thing, just share the page, share the YouTube page, share the podcast. And we're just getting ready for the off season. It's probably my favorite time of the year, besides actually watching them play, because there's just so many things that you can write about, talk about, and that's pretty much what all this is about. So just continue to listen, read, and share opinions and all that. But other than that, it pretty much does it for the 2023 year. We started this podcast at the middle point of the year with the trade deadline, and we pretty much had the website for almost 3 years now. So we're heading into 2024. This offseason is going to be pretty awesome. Hoping Dodgers get some big guys. I know you hope the Phillies make some more splashes to get them over the top. But I'm pretty much all out of things to say. You got anything to close it out?
No, man, it's been fun. Honestly, I didn't think it lasts this long, but it's not something that's gonna go away. We're having fun doing it, and I think biggest thing in the off season, like you said, just check it on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that kind of stuff, because it's gonna be emergency pods. Shout out to Jack Fritz and them. Like when Otani signs, there will be a podcast the next day. I can guarantee you that. It doesn't matter where he goes, there will be a podcast. Like you guys just got to check out for all that stuff. Yeah, just keep it going. Fun time. Will be a lot of articles probably because there's nothing else to do at 6:45 anymore. So yeah, just keep in touch, man.
Yeah, well, that about does it from ClubCast. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at the Diamond Club Zero. Follow me and Jake. We got our stuff. We're constantly talking and interacting with either Phillies fans, baseball fans, Dodger fans, you name it. Other than that, I am out.
Happy off season.